Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Backlog Battle Podcast. This is Alex, and in case this is the first time you've ever listened to the show or watched, we talk to gamers from all walks of life in the hopes of understanding them way better and, in some cases, catching up with what they're up to, because a lot of the guests that we're going to be having over the next few weeks are people who have been on the show on the audio version. And so this time around, we have them on video. And my guest this week is one of my very first guests ever since we came back to the airwaves or on YouTube or whatever. Because it's kind of funny because your episode actually was one of the first video episodes, but we didn't actually feature you on camera for some weird reason. So this time around, I have SuperDerek, who is an excellent YouTuber and Twitch streamer, and I think we're going to be talking about that in the next few minutes. So welcome back, Derek. Good to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this, because when we spoke, you were dabbling with the idea of streaming on Twitch on the regular, and that seems to be something that is becoming even more regular as the days progress. Do you want to talk about how you came out with the idea of focusing some of your talents and skills onto another platform like Twitch?
I've actually been on Twitch, and I've been trying to do it pretty regularly for a while now. And it kind of started with the idea that, I'm already playing through these games in order to review them entirely. Anyway, I'm playing through them from start to finish. And that essentially, I may as well, I'm already just sitting down and recording it, may as well record it with people and enjoy the experience and make a thing of it. And that's been a really awesome thing so far, I think. Got to meet a whole lot of viewers and fans and get feedback. And sometimes if I get stuck, it's a little bit better than reaching out to GameFAQs or something like that. They've saved my bacon a time or two, which has been pretty nice.
So it seems to me, based off of what you're saying, you're okay with backseat gaming.
Sometimes. There are times when I'm not okay with backseat gaming. The worst is when I'm playing the game and I'm doing fine, but then people are like, hey, do this, hey, do that. I'm like, no. But if I'm stuck on something, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm hurting. we can either make the rest of the stream me scratching my head and being lost, or maybe you can say something. I will open the floor for suggestions.
I see.
And they seem to be, a lot of people really respect that, actually, that they don't often offer unsolicited advice. That's kind of one of those things where I do accept some backseat gaming from time to time. Some people are really strict on the matter, and I totally get that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if I were hanging out with a friend or something, I'd be like, hey, dude, I think I might have figured it out. And
yeah.
I think I'm more about that kind of feeling where you can say something, and oh, well, maybe let me try to figure it out on my own, or, oh, good, thank God. What's the solution here? Because this is driving me crazy, Mm-hmm. I like to make it a discussion.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of how I described Twitch streaming in a previous episode. What Twitch really simulates is, or rather captures, is that couch gaming experience that you would do with your friends, except your friends are literally all over the world and they can see you in real time, your struggles. And, as you said, they could share opinions and tips if they so wish. Obviously, yeah. As you said, some people don't welcome the help sometimes, but, sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's convenient. Although, mm-hmm. I will share an anecdote that happened to me. There was this one time that I did try Bloodborne, and if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know that is a game that I struggle with immensely. But out of all the Souls games, it's the one that I've really stuck with, and over the years have tried to really finish, I suppose. And how are people going to help me in that scenario? It's get good or something.
Exactly. That's the meme. That's all they say. Well, better get good.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was listening to our episode fairly recently, and while we talked about your time on YouTube and, of course, how you got into gaming, we never managed to connect those two together. And I was actually wondering, how you went from loving video games, for that matter, to thinking about, hey, I want to make content on YouTube, or I want to make content in general. Could you elaborate on that? Like how those two kind of coalesced?
Well, there was a good long while where I had basically canceled my cable subscription because it was expensive and I was just unhappy with the selection I was getting anyway. So I was like, okay, we're going to cut the cord and I'm just going to basically watch nothing but YouTube for a long time. And this was a long while ago. This was back in the days of, if you remember Screw Attack, when they were still kind of the big dog for gaming. That's where the angry video game nerd, cut his teeth. And there were a lot of other YouTubers that I was also a big fan of back then. Awesome video games from Far From Settled TV and Captain S. Captain S. That was an interesting series. But anyways, after watching these people putting these things together for so long independently, I started getting like, oh man, I've watched everything. So I'm like, well, there's nothing to watch. And I'm like, well, maybe I should make something to watch. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, I have this internal like monologue with myself. I'm like, well, why not? What is it that separates people like them from people like me? And I couldn't think of a good answer except for just doing it. So I'm like, all right, let's try this out. There was also a couple other compounding factors there where, I wanted to. I was really unhappy with like my job at the time. It was very soul draining work, and I just wanted some sort of outlet, some sort of way for me to combine the technical side of my brain with my creative side of my brain, and just kind of mash it all together into something that would draw from all of my abilities and develop some new ones in the process too. So that's where the whole kind of concept came together.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think it's always important to identify what you need, whether it's a creative outlet or a source of revenue or even like a means of self-expression. And I think by acting on it, this is how you basically turned into like one of the veterans of the the space, if you will. Speaking of which, our previous guest actually has a message for you because he has been a fan of yours for a very long time. And this guy, I'm pretty sure you know who he is. His name is Dominic, but most people know him as the Kiseki Nut. And this is what he has for you.
SuperDerek. Hello, my man. The legend himself. I can't believe I'm actually doing a message to you. I absolutely love your content, man. I really do. When I look at actual inspirations for people who have given me the push to try out content for myself and doing it about for a franchise that I love in Trails, you're definitely one of the first guys I think of. So thank you very much for that. And another thing as well, your audiobook for Carnelia. I love it. Like, I would love to learn how to do it in that way because it's you've got a really compelling way of telling those kinds of stories. Now, in terms of the question that I want to ask you, my friend, obviously, I know that you've played Trails from Zero from the Geofront. I know that obviously now we've got 4 games coming out in the Trails series. I mean, are you really looking forward to it? Are you going to play Zero again? Are you going to play Azure again and possibly give a review? Because I would love to see it. And also, what are your thoughts about the release dates as well? Obviously, there's been a little bit of a divide in the community between those who are happy that we're getting these games and those who aren't. I would like to hear it from you personally. What do you think? And do you think this is good for the series going forward, that it allows it to keep its momentum? Or do you feel that maybe it is something that needed to be a little bit more quick or rapid? You keep trucking, my man, and hope to see you soon. Well, I hope to see another one of your videos very soon, whatever it is. See you later.
Oh, that was awesome. Oh, he's such a cool dude. That's thank you. Thank you for the awesome message there, Dominic. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. That just made my day. Thank you. Wow. Okay. Well, in terms of responding to the question about like Trails, like what do I intend to play here? I actually do intend to dive right into Azure here just as soon as I'm finished with my Mother trilogy. Because right now I'm playing through the Mother trilogy, aiming to release my Earthbound re-review for episode number 100, which was also my very first review was Earthbound. So I was thinking, this would be a fun way to kind of bring it back, close the circle and all that. But so immediately after Mother 3, my plan is to dive right into Trails to Azure and give it a full review as well, using the GeoFront patch on the PC release. Now, the news that they've released, that NISA's released about the new set of 4 games that are coming out is just so awesome to finally hear that it is coming to the West officially, not just unofficially. And I'm really excited about that. And the news that also came on the heels of that, after it was announced by the Epic Game Store a bit preemptively, the fact that we're doing this with the translation by the GeoFront team, that's so awesome. That does make me extremely excited. The timeline, honestly, it kind of doesn't bother me, to be totally honest. The fact that they're using the GeoFront patch as a starting point, at least, is really encouraging. And I think it's really great news for the Trails fandom and the community. It feels like this is almost like the sort of thing that never happens. As a huge Mother fan, and I know that the localizers of Mother 3 have offered the localization to Nintendo, and Nintendo's like, nah. The fact that NISA actually approached them and is working with them and using that as a base is amazing. Yeah. And I hope that they're going to be using this extra time to do some things with the series that they haven't, that are maybe, right now, the GeoFront patch is more than just a translation, and it does a lot of extra stuff. So I'm really hoping that these new localizations on these new platforms will incorporate some of those things, like the chat log, for instance, that it now has because of the extra work that they've done. Gosh, would it be too much to hope for the voice acting to be included in the Western releases? Because that would be incredible. Like even just the Japanese voice acting. So I'm just all excited about it, and the fact that it's going to take a little while. It's a bummer that of course, as a way to like honor the agreement that they have with the NISA, that they've taken down the patch that's currently available. I do already have mine installed, so I'm not going to be affected by that. But I get it, and I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily going to be a bad thing, though. That I feel like the people who were really waiting and chomping at the bit to play the game probably have their chance to download the game, and the timing on that was actually really good. Could you imagine had they announced that sooner and prevented the release of the GeoFront patch? That I think would have had everybody up in arms. So really, this is the best of all worlds, and the fact that it has to be delayed to also make sure it works on other platforms, I feel like that's an entirely reasonable expectation.
Yeah, I agree with you, because porting is a very sensitive act of development that not a lot of people really have a full understanding of rather. I myself, who have worked in the industry, at least in the QA level, we had to deal with a lot of different ports. Like I worked on, Call of Duty 3, which was on PS2, original Xbox, Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii. That's like 5 platforms. That I don't remember if it was even on PC. It might not have been, but it's still a lot of platforms. Thinking about like how that had multiplayer, that was difficult because you have to create compromises every time you release a game on different platforms. And I share a lot of your sentiment with this. It takes a lot of work to get it right, and I want to be clear, like the verbiage that NIS used to describe the relationship with GeoFront is very ambiguous, to say the least, because they said that they are working with GeoFront, but they also said that they're using their translation in quote unquote as a basis for the localization, which implies that they're not going to just cut and paste it wholesale from GeoFront. They're literally going to use that as quote unquote translation text, meaning unlocalized text, even though it was localized, and build on top of that. Now, my hope is that they keep a lot of the more personal treasure chest notes and messages that the staff actually had, because I think, it's a great way to honor their involvement in the project. Besides, are you really going to rewrite all of the treasure chest notes in that game? You know how ridiculous that is and how crazy that is? That's insane. Mm-hmm. When the Geofront staff started like sharing a lot of their treasure chest notes, I just felt like really, kind of both happy and sad, because it's like, oh, like this is their work. Like they put so much effort into this. And I hope that what happens to Geofront is that this project legitimizes them as a not just as a fan translation group, but as a team of capable people that could potentially become entrepreneurs and businesses like that could help bring more games to the West, whether it's an official basis or an unofficial basis,
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? I think despite whatever ends up happening, Geofront, just based on the work that they've done in Trails from Zero, in my experience, legitimizes them, and it doesn't really require another company, or rather a company, to really do that. It's the quality is in the work that they've done, and that speaks for itself. I agree. I hope that they do just pretty much take it as is. I'm hoping that it just maybe tweak a few things here and there for whatever kind of consistency that they want to build up or something. But yeah, I really hope that it mostly goes untouched, because it really was great as is.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So let's leave the Trails community a little bit and kind of talk about like your other hobbies and interests outside of gaming, because we did kind of focus a lot about your gaming interests in the previous episode that you're on. Can you tell me a little bit more about like your other interests outside of gaming?
Oh, what were those?
What were those?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. But I do have a few extra hobbies outside of gaming. I like to work with my hands, so that sometimes manifests in the form of like making props for my show, making stone columns out of foam and covering them with mortar mix and then painting them up to make them look, weathered and old and stuff. So I have those in the back. Here's a book stand that I built the other day when I was like, oh crap, I need a book stand to display a book. So I like doing that. I'm not usually a very handy person. I guess I just do things and I don't know how to do them, but I just go and I try my hand at it and see what happens. And sometimes it works out pretty good. So that's one of those things that I like to do. I've got a 3D printer downstairs that I've been using to I 3D printed an ornament. Bring it back to Trails for a second. It came out pretty nice. I don't know. I like doing lots of weird stuff. Old retro computers. For some reason, I'm also really into like DOS PCs. I've got a 486 in my basement hooked up to a CRT monitor, and I'm just, I like stuff, but not necessarily all of that stuff has to make it into a YouTube video. I've recently, actually, I guess I did put some of my art into a YouTube video recently, where I did a stream of an art stream of a bunch of viewer requests, and that was kind of fun. And did a time lapse of that on the YouTube video. But basically, any act of like creating something or improving something, I'm just all into it. I don't know why. I like getting my hands dirty sometimes, I guess.
That's very interesting. It kind of makes me curious then where your creative background kind of comes from, because the way that you described your journey into YouTube from gaming is also very similar, so it kind of makes me wonder, like, do you know how you got exposed to your creative side, or like how you just kind of found out about it or stumbled on it?
I mean, I don't know. I guess my mom says that it's because back when we were growing up, what she would often have my sister and I do just to take up some time is like she'd get some of those paper grocery bags, basically just unfold them and have my sister and I just draw all over them, and it'll just consume our time for hours on end. And maybe that's where it ended up all starting, I guess. It's hard to say for sure. I guess maybe wasn't fully conscious when I had those biggest impacts on me, but I had some pretty good art teachers growing up too. And by high school, I was basically filling every elective slot with some form of art. So, yeah, I guess there was just some sort of drive in me to create things, and I just did.
Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, do you have that Orbment 3D printout that you have lying nearby? Because I'm kind of curious to see it.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I just so happen to have right here.
Wow! Holy crap!
Yeah, that's my 3D printed Orbment. I got the idea. Oh gosh, I don't even know when I got the idea. When I was playing through the game, and then at one point I found a picture frame at a Goodwill that had this piece of glass in it, and I was like, oh, it all comes together. And then I measured it out, and I was like, okay, well, draw this out in Adobe Illustrator with these dimensions that'll just so happen to fit this glass piece here. And then I also outlined a lot of the inner working components here, and then I figured out a way to turn those into 3D models, and then I figured out how to make those into a printable file. And that's with a little extra printing, or a little extra painting rather. It all kind of goes together, kind of loosey-goosey like that, but it looks pretty nice. I'm super happy with the way it came out.
I know. And it's too bad for the people who are listening to this on their podcasting software that they can't see this. Oh, wait, if you go to youtube.com/backlogbattlepodcast, you can actually see what Derek is holding in his hand right now. Well, a few seconds ago, but, yes, this is a shameless plug. I had Derek pull it out because I was like, this is a great incentive for people to actually watch the video version of the podcast, because there's no way in hell you could see this just by listening. So thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, of course, happy to do it. And they also got to see this book display that I put together too. So
that's also really impressive. Like, I don't consider myself as too much of a handyman, although I felt like there were moments in time that I felt like I could be. I think I can probably blame Sesame Street for that at some point, perhaps. But but I also took like drafting classes at some point in high school, and hearing you say like, oh, you just basically made this in Illustrator and then quote unquote figured out a way to make a 3D model out of it, I'm just like, it just goes to show, that you have this drive and passion to, for the lack of a better term, brute force your way into creating something.
That is exactly what I do, because I also, bringing it back to streaming for a second, I have this thing that I do every other weekend where I play 3 different RPGs all at the same time on an emulator. And the way that I make that work is that I have a script that I'm not a programmer, but I scripted this in AutoHotkey to run this set of commands every time anybody subscribes, cheers, or uses channel points. And it switches the game over to the next one in the rotation by triggering off some save states and then load states, or change game load state, that a whole bunch of basically things that you would do in an emulator, but it just happens like in the blink of an eye. So I'll just be playing a game 1 minute, and then the next minute I'll be playing a different game just all of a sudden, and I got to react to it. So, and again, I'm not a programmer, but I guess I kind of am. I'm a very bad programmer.
I think it has something to do with the way that you view the world and how your intuition works. Because I've met many people and have learned about many people who have seen the world differently, that don't have a very traditional way of interpreting goals and creative projects. And based off of what we talked about today, and I'm really happy now that I brought up the question that I had earlier, you really display this kind of gung-ho method of just like, hey, you know what? It's something that, I want to make. I'm just going to do it. And in a way, it kind of reminds me of Lady Pelvic when I spoke to her a few episodes ago, where she's just like, well, you know what? Like, there's no better time than now to learn something new, and I'm just going to do whatever. And so I just wanted to identify that, because I admire that a lot. You can't imagine how many times, like, in my brain, like, I talk myself out of things, but seeing the things that you made, like visually speaking, like, again, sorry for the audio people. It's rather impressive.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So what's your next project then? You have an ornament now. You have like a bookshelf, of course. I saw that on Twitter you were trying to get the book on JRPGs, which honestly I was hesitant on it just because like I didn't, this YouTube is my business and I'm not exactly making bank here. So it's like to spend that much money and then import it from a foreign country, it's kind of like I have to like do a whole bunch of accounting math. But then they sold out.
Yep. Yeah, that was actually really lucky. I saw that they were coming out here pretty soon with that book, so I actually reached out to them and I said, that I have a channel that covers a lot of the similar stuff. Bunch of JRPGs. I like to talk about the development histories of those games and present them, and I felt like we had a similar, I guess, to use a marketing word, like a target demographic and target audience, right? And I was like, well, I would really like to be able to like show this book off on my YouTube channel. And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And so they actually sent me one. So I've got one that I did an unboxing of, and I'm actually going to be reading through that here pretty soon and give like my full review of the guide to JRPGs, which is pretty exciting.
That's cool.
So yeah, that's one of those other things. It's just got to be, I guess, okay with reaching out to people and seeing what happens, because the worst they can say is like no.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like why I tell people who are starting out as content creators is it never hurts to ask. And I feel bad every time I bring this up because it feels like I'm bragging, but why not? The way that I got to interview Hironobu Sakaguchi is literally like an email to Mistwalker and say, hey, is he free? And they're like, yeah, he is free. When do you want? Oh, Wednesday is free.
That is so awesome. That is still so awesome.
There's a reason why it shows up twice, like one on the podcast channel as the first video and the other one on the main channel. I just can't get enough of that. I'm just like, I'm gonna milk this as much as I can because this is freaking great. But it demonstrates that whole edict, right? Like that whole idea of like, you don't really know what you get unless you really ask people. And honestly, like before you had even suggested that, that you did, or before you even brought up that you actually reached out to the publishers to do that sort of thing, I was actually thinking of doing the same thing because, for one thing, I show up on camera now, which is kind of funny because the last time that we spoke, I was like, even on that episode, I was hinting like, oh, well, maybe you'll find me on an episode somewhere or in a video somewhere when I'm showing up on video. But of course, now I'm just like all over the place,
Yep. I remember that.
Yeah, right? It's crazy. It's like, look at me, like I'm actually on camera now. I got like my little trinkets back there, like whatever. It's a lot to see. Anyways, to kind of go back to like the question that I asked though, so what's next for you right now? Because you're going through your Twitch journey. Obviously the YouTube channel is doing extremely well. Like I still enjoy like the videos that you put out and stuff like that. And the reason why I asked this question is because a few months ago, I had somebody who is a full-time Twitch streamer who is kind of thinking about like where the next step is of his career. And, not to say that you're not going to continue to improve your Twitch, for crying out loud. You learn programming to do some of this stuff. It just kind of makes me wonder where that creative brain is thinking of right now, or what it's thinking of right now.
So the unboxing that I did of the guide to the JRPGs and the Mother 3 manual here are actually two of the inaugural episodes of a new show that I'm starting on my channel called The Item Shop. And so I wanted to get a whole lot more hands-on with actually showing off some of the other sides of RPGs that I love, like the packaging, the extra stuff, the feelies. One of the things that I did earlier on in my YouTube channel was like with Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, I got out the box and I showed the hardbound book, and here's the medallion that came out with Lunar 2. And I just thought that was so cool to have these things. And I've been collecting a long while, so I realized I've got a lot of stuff that I can show off and just kind of I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty cool thing to do, and I wanted to maybe try getting my hands on some more collector's editions things and just sort of incentivize that process, and just yeah. So that's kind of like what I'm looking at in the immediate future is like bringing that and improving the quality of that production side of things, and I'm still just tinkering with all kinds of things. Like I've got a different microphone now set up above my work table here, which I haven't had a chance to properly put to use, but I think it'll be a lot better than the lavalier mic that I've been using up until this point. And just basically everything is still in flux, which is why at the start of this chat, I was like, oh, I need to tidy up a little bit because I had stuff everywhere and step stools and ladders and, just I'm not one of those kinds of people who has a clean desk. I feel like whenever I'm one of those kinds of people who, like, in order to get anything done, all of my stuff needs to be at arm's reach. And it's unfortunate because it looks kind of messy, because it is. But, I mean, you can't argue with the results.
Yeah.
At least for me.
You don't mean that, like, this room isn't the way that it is? Your room isn't the way that it is when you're working? That is a shock, Derek. So shocked right now. No, dude. Like, if you look over here, there's, like, my hat, my phone, a whole bunch of medication, and, like, a couple of things of controllers. Dude, like, if people saw this desk, they would freak the hell out.
Yep. I actually just rearranged my room today. Like, I placed my computer from one spot of the room to another spot because I'm like, acoustically, it would make a lot more sense for it to be actually in the closet instead of over there in the corner of the room. And I'm like, so I just went through everything today, and yeah, it looks like a bomb went off in my office. I'm not going to lie.
Well, it looks great.
Well, thank you. The part that you can see looks great.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Very strategic camera angles going on right here.
Yes. For the longest time, I struggled with that too, because for one thing, look at how big my room is. My room is actually like, typical rooms are about like maybe 9 or 10 feet across. Like, this is like a 12 to 14 foot room, like across, like both ways. It's a huge room. And a lot of people's rooms, like when they're on camera, they're obviously, they either position themselves against a wall or something like that, or whatever. I'm like, I don't really want to move things around. I like the desk the way that it is. I'm just going to be lazy and just be like, let's point something there. Let's set some things in the background. It's interesting to look at. And maybe that's good enough. And I'm not even at your level when it comes to lighting and acoustics, because I'm just like, acoustics, what's that? I'm just gonna like edit it in GarageBand. I don't know, like that's more work, but screw it.
I mean, it depends. Like, there's a lot of work. I'm like, okay, the better the quality of sound I get when I record, the less I have to do later. It's like it's either doing a lot of work up front, getting the acoustics right, or doing a lot of work later by doing it all, in post. Which I guess it's a trade-off, really.
Yeah.
I'm just particular and picky sometimes, and the longer I do this, the more I'm like, I just want my job to be easier sometimes. Yeah. I'm like, I'll just do this, and that'll make it easier. I'll do that, and it'll make it easier. Remove obstacles. That's actually something that the Happy Console Gamer and I talked a little bit about back when I first lost my job when I was living in Seattle. He actually kind of brought me up to, I was living in Seattle. He was up in Vancouver, and he's like, well, just come up here and hang out. And, we talked about stuff, and because I was going to try to go full time on YouTube for a while. And that's one of those things that he was talking about, is just figure out a way to remove obstacles from, for your being creative, right? You want to create videos, don't make it difficult, like if you can put up a spot for your camera and leave it there. Because up to that point, I've been like, setting up my cameras, setting up my lights, rearranging everything. Like I would literally rearrange my living room so I could film, and then I would rearrange it to put it back so we could live in it after the fact. So that's something that I've really taken to heart, is figuring out a way to set things up to be more conducive to creating videos. And that's really been helpful.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice, because a lot of people tend to overproduce and over arrange their furniture, even when, when they want a very specific mood and feel for their videos or even their streams to kind of invoke, which is fine. I think some people can get away with it, but when you're living with somebody like, my wife, for example, your wife, for example, it's like that starts becoming a point of conflict. And, and even with people in relationships in general, right? Like people who aren't involved in the creative process. And I think that's actually a really good advice, because that was actually the exact reason why I did the way that I did with the background here, because I'm just like, I could record it over there against a wall, or I can literally sit at the exact same desk that I edit everything in, see myself on the monitor, as opposed to turning one around so that way I can know what I look like, and keep it simple. And that's right, keep it simple, stupid. Like that's the age-old motto, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's actually very interesting, though, that you managed to, reach out to Johnny and stuff, because Johnny and I have known each other since 2009. I think I remember you and I talked about it in the previous episode, but he's never able to get on the podcast for some reason. In the entire 12-year history of this podcast, in its various forms, I could never get Johnny to be on the show. Maybe I'll try again to see what the hell is going on with him. I've interviewed so many people, like Alex from RX Gaming, for example, Lady Pelvic, as I mentioned, but not Johnny. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here, man? And even funny enough, I live in Portland right now. I'm obviously closer in Pacific Northwest, but I bet you that if I ask him right now, and this will date the video, it's probably going to be like, well, dude, I don't know if you've seen, but in the Pacific Northwest, we got a freaking heat wave right now, dude. Yeah. It's we were at 115 degrees the other day, which is insane. But
I never thought in my life before, thank God I moved to Kansas until that happened. Because I lived in Seattle for not a short 10 years. It felt a lot shorter than that. And I lived on the 5th floor of an apartment building, the top floor, and it would get toasty as heck. Because when people say oh, it's 100 degrees, 110 degrees in the Pacific Northwest, everybody who lives down in the Midwest is like, oh, big deal, because they don't know you don't have central air. They don't know that. Because here and further south in Texas, everybody has central air. It's like, well, of course we have central air. Yeah, it's hot outside, just stay inside, stupid. But when I was in Seattle, on the top floor of that apartment building, it was like, there is nothing I can do but lay here, and just try not to sweat and just take a cool shower.
Wait, hold on. I've heard about this before. So I have a friend who works at a undisclosed video game company that I won't mention here. He mentioned that some of his coworkers who live around the offices over there don't have air conditioning. What is up with Washington and maybe Vancouver that there doesn't seem to be central air? Is that because the buildings are older, or what is it all? Do you know?
I have no idea. It's new construction, no AC, and I guess it's because they're oh, we stay cool enough that we don't need it except maybe a couple times a year. And I'm like, and for the most part, that's actually true. It's always cooled off at night and stuff, but you do eventually sort of almost get used to it. Almost. Except at night. We eventually had to get a portable air conditioner for our apartment, but it's crazy. It's just nobody expects this kind of weather to hit the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And then it does, and you're like, well, try not to get too hot.
Yeah. I want to get back to what Johnny said, though. And by the way, in case people were wondering, Johnny is a great dude. I'm not, all the things that I said earlier are in jest. Obviously, the dude is a busy man. For crying out loud, he made a movie, years ago, if you remember that. That's freaking insane. But I've always admired Johnny and his filmmaking abilities. But, going back to what he said is to kind of take away the obstacles for you to be able to make great videos. I think that is such really good advice for anybody who wants to be a content creator in general. And also the whole thing about asking people, actually reaching out to people and asking. It never fails to ask. I remember I don't consider my channel as big whatsoever, but like, from time to time, I get emails from people who just want me to be part of their show or something like that, or a collaboration. There are caveats, of course, like, I won't talk about those caveats here right now, but somebody from England reached out to me and they said like, well, I know you do video games and stuff like that, like on your channel, but where you have an episode where we talk about Japanese TV shows, and we're a TV show podcast. I'm wondering if you're interested. And I guessed it, and I had a great time, and they eventually became a guest on this podcast. So this is all to say that the creative process is very fluid. And I don't know if you agree with this, and that you need to cater your skills and talents and use those in order to make your life as a creator easier.
Yeah. I don't think I can disagree with that on any level. I think that it's entirely, at least for me. I should preface that, I guess I do preface that a lot. It's like, well, at least for me, this is what works for me, because I consider myself weird in a lot of ways, but it works for me. So maybe it should work for you if you're weird in the same way that we are.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then I have to ask, like, because as content creators, we always face a lot of challenges, right? Every single day, there's always something new or something that goes wrong. In the entire history of your YouTube channel, what would you say was the most difficult thing you've ever made for that channel?
Well, like on a technical level, there was the corpse party review that I did, which featured my wife as an extra. I made her into a ghost. So what I did was I filmed us in front of a green screen, and that was something that I wasn't really very familiar with at the time, and it came out okay in the end. But it was a very messy process. It was, again, one of those things like, well, I guess I'll figure out how this works now. And yeah, I think that was probably on a technical level the most difficult thing, because I also didn't have a computer that was like especially well built for doing that sort of thing, and color matting and all that stuff. So I think that's probably been the most difficult thing from a filmmaking perspective. Sometimes it's really also difficult to review games that I have a soft spot for, because I'm like, well, of course the game's good. Why do I need to tell you how good the game is? Here's the game. It's good. It speaks for itself, right? Like, that's one of those things that your brain wants to do, or to reassess whether or not those things that you took for granted as being good are actually good. Because like, you got to fight your own biases sometimes, or just embrace them and just be like, yeah, I'm biased. Here's my biased review of an awesome game. It's the best game in the world ever.
Yeah.
It could be anything. I don't think that the creative process has ever been what I would say is like a really overwhelming challenge for me. I mean, there are other challenges, just not for me, at least in the creative process, really.
What would those be?
Remembering the good comments and forgetting the bad ones is one. And trying to internalize the fact that one other person's success is not your loss.
Yeah.
Is to not compare yourselves to others, or that your success to theirs. It's not always easy to always be upbeat about your prospects.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I think every YouTuber probably has to struggle with, at least a little bit, is the fight for relevance, right? Because it always does feel like you're on a treadmill, right, where you're trying just to keep up with the belt, but sometimes you're caught up, sometimes you're a little bit behind. So there's that.
And there's also, I think, the struggle to remember why you do this to begin with, right? Because like, as you said, we kind of get caught up in this kind of treadmill of worrying about views, worrying about subscribers, and worrying about metrics, when if we kind of went back to basics, right, and realized that we're doing this because we love gaming, it's at those moments when we realize that, and then we make something from that realization, that we make some of our best work, and ironically sometimes our most successful work. And to kind of talk a little bit about myself is, lately, personally, this year has been hellacious. I think I said that when we last spoke in February, but it is still hellacious. The only time that I had a break for reviews is literally like Memorial Day weekend, when my wife and I went on vacation. But right then, when I got back, it's like, well, back on the treadmill again to talk about treadmills. It's like back to the review cycle again. Obviously, you have you're not beholden to embargoes or anything of that sort, but in my end of the business, it's like I have to reach out to people, I have to secure game codes and make sure and explain to them and remind them like what getting codes mean, for a small channel like mine, that sort of thing, without being too overbearing. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of our days is occupied by those kinds of communications. And so for me personally, when I find myself in those situations where I'm like just emailing and not actually playing video games, like I kind of feel like those are my lowest points, because I forget why I started doing this, which is really for the love of video games. And I just want to kind of remind people out there to always kind of remember the values that you started with. And I think for you, like, there is, the challenge is part of the fun for you. That's what I kind of see a lot. And I think, it shows in the things that you make, the results of all that hard labor. I mean, my goodness, in this whole hour alone, you've mentioned so many things that you created that I'm just like, over here totally intimidated by just the whole idea. And mind you, I know how to program, and I'm just like, but to program a script to just automatically switch games, emulator, load save states, I'm just like, man, no. I just kind of mentioned that because like if anything, like I'm just kind of in admiration of the accomplishments that you had. And you're absolutely right. Success is relative. It's relative to what you personally want this to be. Do you want it to be something financially successful? Do you want it to be like a way for you to express yourself? Do you want it to be something that people can meet up and kind of really bond together? There's many different definitions of success, and I think it's very important to remember that. So my question to you then is, what is your definition of success?
My definition of success as of right now is to make videos that I would enjoy watching, and hopefully to get as many people to watch them as possible. because I like the creative process, and it's okay to, if I just have a few people watch my videos, like that's fine. But really, I love the interaction that you get out of people who watch a video and they're like, hey, I really liked what you said about this one part. Hey, I really liked the way you filmed this one thing, like that feedback loop that I guess social media is conditioned us to be reliant upon sometimes is kind of nice. But the actual production side of things is also really nice. And I need to make sure that, like I said, it's difficult it's difficult to sometimes keep perspective, and that's what I'm working on personally right now is that aspect of things, and just being able to be proud of the things that I've made rather than worrying about, oh, well, YouTube's algorithm says I really shouldn't do this sort of thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know if you have kids, but like the way that I describe this whole process to people is that, releasing a video on YouTube is kind of like sending your kids to college. You don't want to micromanage it when it's released. You just want to see how it is, because seeing a video, quote unquote, fail or not do well is just as important as seeing a video succeed. Because how are you going to learn, if you kind of tweak the values and stuff like that in order to make it successful? and so that you can apply to your next work. Like, what would be the basis of that? Well, if you change that video like 5-6 different times when you release it, are you really going to learn something? You're just going to make assumptions because you literally changed it 5 or 6 times. Is it because of the change number 2, or is it change number 6? Who knows? You didn't. You don't. You can only make educated guesses. And that's kind of like what I tell people. And when people tell me like, well, but like, it takes me a long time to make my next video. Like, I want to try this right now. I'm like, well, bitch, yes, this is an explicit podcast. Like, freaking make it faster. Like, figure it out a way to make it faster. One of the people that we had on the show, Alex Noon, who was Eric's Gaming on YouTube, he literally told me like, yeah, like, we've made it so that, the kind of like what Johnny said, we've tried to make videos as fast as we can, but with higher quality in a lot of different aspects. And I think, for you and I, who really love the production value and making sure that our production quality is really high, it's also important for us to realize that production quality isn't just like how good and how polished everything is, because we're the only ones that see it that way. Our audience probably sees something completely different that we're not seeing that they really love, and I wanted to kind of point that out, because I think that's also a really good thing to recognize as a content creator, is that sometimes, even though we're so honed in on like what we want to make, sometimes we do put blinders on as a result,
Yeah, I think that that's definitely true, because I feel like, there's probably a lot of people who really enjoyed my earlier work that was like filmed on a cell phone, but now it's a little bit more involved, a little more highfalutin,
Yeah.
so it's like, maybe those people that liked the earlier stuff aren't enjoying the new stuff as much. And it's one of those things that's like, well, what do I enjoy? What would I want to see? And it all kind of comes back to that, I guess. At least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask, because this is more kind of a technical question, I suppose. How fast can you put out videos? Like, what was the fastest video that you ever spent on, and how long did it take you? The reason why I ask is because, like, I'm always curious about this from a creator perspective. But yeah, like, preferably something recent, I suppose.
Okay, so like something recent, my review of Fantation. My impressions video of Fantation, because
see.
One of those things is not like the others. One of those things is that it removes one of the big bottlenecks of producing a video, which is, for me, that self-imposed restriction of I will only review it once I've finished the game, right? So by removing that restriction, where I'll allow myself to talk, candidly, off the cuff about my experiences with a game so far, whether it because I've played the demo and I want to share my experiences with the demo, or because this new game came out that I'm interested in trying out, but maybe not necessarily completing, for whatever reason. That's one of those things that I find just really decreases the amount of time that goes into them, because I no longer have to do the 100 hours of upfront work, and then I don't have to justify that with a 10-20 minute video. I can just be like, hey, I played this for a few hours and then I edited for a few hours. This can be a 5-minute video. It's like, it's one of those things that takes less time to edit because it's nice and short. So, I feel like, and they do pretty well, because usually they're new games and they're relevant and people are searching for them, instead of like, I don't know, Mother 1. Like, nobody's really searching for that right now, but I'm like, I'm going to review it anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play it 4 times just to try different aspects, and then I'm going to make a 20-minute video about it. So, and the weird thing is, I feel like there's an inverse relationship between the amount of effort you put into a video and the amount of success that it finds. It's like, yeah, the shorter you spend on it, probably the better. It's weird, but the artistic side of me is like, the perfectionist of that artistic side of me is like, no, you got to keep doing it. You got to do it right. You got to be like the movies. You got to slow pan.
Yeah, that's why I think the college kid descriptor or idea, if you will, works out for me so well, is because, for one thing, right now I'm in the middle of editing my Scarlet Nexus review, and there's so many things, I don't know if you noticed, but like I edit it based on the beat, so for example, if a game is an action game, like I edit it as if you're watching an action movie, so there's a lot of rapid cuts and stuff like that, scene transitions to kind of reflect the pace of the game, if you will. But that takes so long. And mind you, this is like a 17-minute video, so it's like trying to like do all of that and kind of invoking this feel. It takes so long, like it's crazy. And so and that's my struggle, is trying to figure out like how to make things faster without losing the soul of the channel, if you will, because everything that I make is scripted. And mind you, I think I made like 2 or 3 unscripted videos recently, and one thing that I noticed is that I am terrible at it, because I rant, and what's supposed to be a 5-minute video is now a 12-minute video. Like I've watched it so many times, I'm just like, okay, yeah, we gotta rein this in a bit, So, but I think that's a struggle that every creative has, is to find that right balance of personality and authenticity. And I think that's something that I learned talking to you today, is despite the struggle, it's very important to always bring it back to who you are and what you want. Yes, there is a point where you have to send your kids off to college so that they can meet new people and interact with them and chat with them. Maybe the parent will get to meet these other new friends, through the comment threads or even social media. But until then, we let them go. We see what grades they get, and maybe we'll react the next time, or for the next kid, right? Because we're using that analogy.
I liked this analogy because I'm thinking of like sending my 5-year-old off to college instead, because it took less time to put together.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, you learned your ABCs. Time to go off to college.
Yeah. Right.
Get that PhD for me.
Yeah, and by our definition, we probably have like 100 kids we've sent off to college or like preschool or whatever. This is so ridiculous. That was a good analogy. I actually really like that. I should keep using that now. So unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show, and as with all good things, it's funny how the best shows, the best episodes, like always end like so fast for some reason.
I know. I just looked at the clock and I'm like, wait, really? Yeah, really?
Yeah. Like every time I say that, every single guest that's been on this show, and the only way to see this if you watch this on video on youtube.com/backlog battle podcast, every single person, Kaseki Nut, Food for Dogs, Lady Pelvic, they're just like, wait, really? Like what? Really? Like even you, it's like, it's crazy. But it really is true. It is the end of the show. So, before I mess up and end the show, before you actually telling people where to find you, because that did happen with Eric Landon, and I feel really, really bad about that, can you tell people where they can find you? Because, you're on YouTube, you're on Twitter, you're on Twitch. Please let them know so that they can enjoy your content.
Well, sure. You can find me on YouTube and all of my videos there at youtube.com/SuperDerek RPGs. I think.
No, it does not have the RPGs. It's SuperDerek.
SuperDerek.
It's like, so Derek doesn't know this, but he actually has a label underneath him that tells people like where his YouTube channel is and his Twitter. But I want him to say it because obviously the audio people can't see it. Yeah. So let's try that again.
Yeah. So you can find me over at
it's okay. We'll leave this in.
I'm on YouTube sometimes. You can find me there at SuperDerek. No. YouTube.com/SuperDerek. And I also happen to have a Twitch channel where we do stuff like the Jukebox Zero Challenge, which is the 3 games all at the same time. That's something that we do in between playing the games that I review. And that is over at twitch.tv/SuperDerek RPGs. And that one does have the RPGs. And I guess I'm also on Twitter, but yeah, I'm not very good at Twitter. At SuperDerek RPGs.
Yes, that is correct. Yes. Yeah.
I'm very bad at this.
Dude, I'm terrible at like Twitter. I'm terrible at Instagram. There will be times of the year when I'm really good at Twitter, but for the most part, I'm pretty terrible at it. But thank you very much for joining us today. It's been such a blast. So many good laughs and so many good things to just kind of ingest and take in, and hopefully people feel inspired with what you've shared with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
Yeah, for the second time. Maybe there'll be a third time. Pretty sure there'll be a third time. What am I kidding?
It'll be the charm. I'll get my socials correct that time.
Definitely. And of course, thank you for watching and listening to the show. If you are listening to this on some sort of, third-party podcast app and you want to subscribe, all the links to the podcast are on anchor.fm/backlogbattle. Doesn't have podcast. It's just Backlog Battle. And of course, if you want to watch this show and you're listening to this right now, you can watch it on youtube.com/backlogbattle podcast. Because if you go to Backlog Battle, that's my main channel. That's where you find all my reviews and all the conversations about video games, outside of all the interviews that I have on the Backlog Battle podcast. So until next week, at Wednesday at 12 a.m. Pacific time, there'll be a brand new episode of the show with a brand new awesome guest. And we'll see you guys later. And happy gaming. Bye.